My brain very much works in terms of helping people understand how a technology can help them. 17 years ago, nobody knew what Apple was except a toy. And so not necessarily replacing people, that has been a common theme. And so the idea is that instead of replacing people, how do I make them better at what they do? How do I augment their tasks? The hardware is just a piece of hardware. It's the software that makes it come alive. And again, it's the same with AI, right? It's all about that software and that interpretation. That's the piece. Time is the thing that we should be better at. And so if I can help a customer be better with their time, if I can help a partner be better with their time, right? Everybody wins.
Bonjour à tous et bienvenue dans Pixel Perfect, le podcast 100% dédié à la computer vision. Je suis Pierre-Nicolas Tiffreau, CTO de Pixelia, une suite d'outils conçus pour faciliter la vie des ingénieurs en intelligence artificielle. De l'annotation au monitoring de modèles en production. Toutes les 2 semaines, je vous présente des entretiens exclusifs avec des figures clés de l'industrie pour discuter de leurs défis, de leurs succès et de la façon dont ils transforment le monde de la vision par ordinateur. Installez-vous confortablement, c'est parti.
Hello, Nick. So happy to have you here. So we are in Nashville because we both attended CVPR today. So for those who don't know CVPR, it's one of the biggest computer vision conference in the world. So really happy to be there with Pixelia and also TRU Recognition. And it was also the opportunity to meet in real life because you come from Australia and we come from France.
Sure do.
Really happy to be there today. You have plenty of experience in technologies and most recently computer vision. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into TRU Recognition?
Sure. So again, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. It's my first time in Nashville, so it's a bit of an experience. But so my background, I worked in enterprise for 20 plus years. I worked for Apple for most of that time, so I've had a lot of experience talking to large enterprise customers about deploying technology. And then probably a couple of years ago, I started looking at AI as, I think, the next big wave of technology. And a friend of mine was starting in a little startup called TRU Recognition. And so Max, the CEO, said, you know what, we're looking at expanding. We need to have someone who can speak to customers about what we do. And so that was when I got on board. So that was two and a bit years ago now. That's how long I've been with the company. And it's been a wild ride. It's been, the technology has changed so much just in the 2 years. It's been amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. I can imagine. And just before we dive into TRU Recognition, so you spent 17 years at Apple, given your LinkedIn. So that's really crazy. Can you tell us which habit or mindset most shape how you work today, and also how you frame and sell Vision AI solutions?
Sure. So my background is engineering. I just don't tell people that because I've been in sales for such a long time. So I have a double degree in computer science and engineering. Okay. And so my brain very much works in terms of helping people understand how a technology can help them. And so I spent a long time at Apple helping people understand how they could use iPhones and iPads and Macs in their day-to-day work, which didn't always go down well. Forget about it now. Everybody knows what an iPhone is, but 17 years ago, nobody knew what Apple was except a toy. And so a lot of times when you walk into an enterprise organization, they struggle to understand how a technology can help them. And so most of my history has been set about helping a customer understand how can I use this technology to make my life better, to make my employees' lives better. And so that's where my mindset is. And when I got introduced to AI, it was very much another tool to help an organization be better at what they do. And so not necessarily replacing people, that has been a common theme for technology for a long time is, we're assuming that we're going to use technology to replace people.
Yeah, software, internet, everything. And
so the idea is that instead of replacing people, how do I make them better at what they do? How do I augment their tasks? How do I remove the mundane from what they do so they can focus on the things that they're most valued at? And so that's been where my background is.
Okay, so just so we picture what you just said. So you were, because most of us, we know iPhone from the consumer brand, let's say like the everydays or like our laptops even for work. So you were selling this kind of hardware, like the ones that we all know, to companies and seeing how in the area of really the enterprise, they can leverage this to do more stuff.
Yeah. I mean, Apple, I don't know if everyone knows, Apple only have one type of product, right? They don't build a enterprise version of their devices. It's one device. And so again, it's more about helping a group understand, how can I use that consumer-based technology to change the way that I do things, right? And again, when I look at AI models, there are a lot of things out there that people use today in a consumer land. And it's more about, how do I recognize that? How do I make that available for an enterprise? Because again, once we start putting mission critical solutions in, it can't have a consumer type experience. It has to have the kind of rigidity that an enterprise experience needs in order to continue to function. And so there's twofold. One is helping them understand how to use it. And then the second piece is making sure that it works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so those are the two functions there. But again, most of my time was helping them understand, how can this consumer grade device change what I do? Now, where it really started to change was when the App Store started, right? And so again, the hardware is just a piece of hardware. It's the software that makes it come alive. And again, it's the same with AI, right? It's all about that software and that interpretation. That's the piece. And so some of the things that we saw today, at the computer vision seminar was just stunning. Like some of the things that are coming out. And again, it's super exciting to see all of the new things that are coming about. And some of those students that we saw today, some of their ideas will be the visionary leaders of tomorrow. You can see it.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
for
it's
sure.
How do you nurture that? How do you make that better?
Yeah, but you can imagine that those technologies that we see here, so they are currently in the labs, that they are not in production yet, but they are going to be pushed by enterprises before becoming some customer technologies that we will have in our phones. It's just like ChatGPT was like a bit more the opposite. So everyone started using it as a customer and just for like silly stuff and just like for today, everyday's life. And then companies started to wonder how they can actually leverage those. And this is when you can actually see like the adoption curve of ChatGPT and all of the other ones like the LLMs, because like it became an enterprise product. And it must have been like really helpful for the companies. They must have gained so many stuff. And maybe you could have sold, if you didn't went to computer vision, you might have sold LLM solution instead.
Yeah. I mean, look, Apple have been using LLMs for a long time, right? But again, the focus for them is, how do I use the LLM in my own product? And so that's why for me, it's exciting to see LLMs being used outside of that. Because I think the growth, if you're limited to a specific solution, it's when you start to expand that, right? That's why a lot of the open source stuff is really exciting, because they're basically saying, hey, well, how can you use what I've built to be better at what you do, right? Now, the interesting bit you mentioned about ChatGPT is we're seeing some organizations actually start to combine the two, which is, how do I take that model, and then how do I take that large language model, and how do I make them work together to be better? Now, that's when you're starting to take the human out of the picture, and it starts to become very, very interesting, because then we can start to get really, really powerful, because we've got that diversity happening, right? And so, as I said, it's a very exciting space, and I'm seeing more and more stuff every day. And so I think this is going to be the beginning of an incredible journey for AI.
And as we were in CVPR today, and we talked about Apple, and Apple has a booth at CVPR, like a huge one. So we talked about this off record, but at the time you were at Apple, like they were not exhibiting at such kind of events, like their research, and now they put a lot of effort, like presenting their work, building awareness, and other stuff. Like, what do you think changed in the meantime?
So Apple had a very different policy. I look, most large organizations had a different policy with regards to research and development 10 years ago, right? Everything was private. Everything was quiet. Everything was, we don't want anyone to get the jump on us. I think where we've seen that change is when you see things like GitHub and open source, where suddenly it's like, okay, those models actually get better by opening the community. And so I think most large organizations, we saw them all today, right? Meta was there, Google was there,
Uber was there,
right? Everybody's there, because they sort of understand that by opening it up to the community, we actually get better results. And so Apple started doing that 2 or 3 years ago, right? I can tell you, I was there for a long time. We were not allowed to speak to the press. We were not allowed to have social profiles. And so they've changed that now, because, the community is a great source of data. And so by having them be part of the discussion, everybody wins. All right. Because your solution gets better. They get a better, experience. They get better results. And so, yeah, I understand why the large organizations are doing that. You will still have the small organizations who go, this is my personal IP and my protective. I'm not going to share that. I think that they will fall by the wayside as the other organizations start to get the benefit of that outsourced community.
Yeah, and also like today you're seeing a lot of companies that go like from day one they go open source. Like that's a choice that we didn't do, but in like 2024, 2025, with like when you see the openness you have of models, for example, from Hugging Face, like everyone wants to publish their work, so it's like used and benchmarked and everything like being open source. So I think that will become the default choice in the coming years.
I mean, the obvious one is scale, right? So if you look at when you're testing something, if you have a handful of testers, you'll get a certain amount of data and a certain amount of response. If you then make that available to, I don't know, everyone who has an iPhone, you suddenly have, I don't know what,
millions,
a couple of 100 million users, right? And so it's like, that's a completely different data set, right? Now, the big thing is about privacy and protecting of the privacy of the people. And so you need to make sure that there's baked in, but still it's an amazing data set for you to be able to build on. And so it makes perfect sense for those larger organizations to say, hey, we want to open source this, because how else do we get 100 million testers? Right?
Yeah, that's for sure. But it's funny because like you have to balance this with like the IP protection that you want to keep. And it's funny because now it seems that the mass testing that you can do has more value than actually protecting the IP, and you will be advancing the world most if you publish your work that rather than keeping it for you, even for your own future work. Like you will benefit from others' work also, and people that have been expanding what you have already done. So it's sort of a virtuous cycle, let's say. But I think at first it's not easy to get for like enterprise leaders to say, okay, yeah, we can free everything else. It would be fine.
You know, enterprises will not release their data. I mean, but that's the other bit, right? Is that, you know, most enterprises will keep their data to themselves. And yet it'll be the ones who say, hey, can I supplement that data with open source data as well? Does that give me a better result? And I think those organizations are the ones that will win. I think the one variable that most organizations will be able to keep as their IP is time, right? The time to value, the time to market is the one variable that even if you're first on the scene, right, the quicker you can get your solution in the hands of people, that's what will give you your relevance, right? And again, being the best player who comes second last doesn't help, right? Because by then everyone's already using it. By the time you have your solution in the hands, it's probably been open sourced, right? And so it's like by then you've lost your advantage. And so the idea about how do we get this into the hands of the customers as quickly as possible, right? Because that time to value is a huge component.
That's for sure. If we focus a bit more on you, so you present yourself as a head of sales and AI partnerships. So which side of that name pulls harder in like your daily work, let's say, and how are those two titles really linked together?
So yeah, it's an interesting role. With regards to which one pulls harder, they both pull me in both directions at the same time. So half of my role is speaking to customers, right? And so that's where I spend a lot of my time. I say customers, but it's customers and partners. Okay. So, and when I buy partners, I mean integration partners.
So you answered the question. It's like head of sales for the customers and partnership for the partners.
Yeah. And so the partners is more the AI model vendors that we speak with. And so, you know, that sometimes is a more interesting conversation than actual end customers, because everyone has their own idea of what they're trying to do in this world. And sometimes you throw them a bit of a curveball by saying, hey, we can help in a different way. And so sometimes that's a very interesting conversation. The other thing, as you said, we're based in Australia. And so often these phone calls are at 3 a.m. or 10 p.m. because we're in a different time zone. So, but there is some amazing work being done by organizations everywhere. Like, and I've spoken to people in the US, people in Europe, people in Southeast Asia. So it's one of those things where the more you broaden your scope in a conversation, the more you see and the more you hear. The customer side is probably more interesting because they literally don't know what they don't know. Yeah. And so quite often it's a customer saying, hey, I need someone to do this for me. It's like, well, no, you don't. What you really need is someone to solve this problem, not what you're looking at. And so the number of times we've been asked to say, we want to do a test of your solution because we're testing for people, you know, counting. And you're like, that's the most boring thing you could possibly throw at me. But what else could we do? Right. And so it's getting them thinking about, you've got this huge data pool with your CCTV infrastructure. Stop thinking about what you're trying to look for and start thinking about what you're trying to solve. And so that's the main difference, right? And so quite often that mindset, it's a shift. And I can tell you, I can count on one time the number of times that you've walked into a customer meeting and they know exactly what they're looking for. But on the other hand, that those times when you can see that light bulb moment, when suddenly their eyes, they change, they go, I get it. I understand now what we're trying to do. And so they're the best customers because they're the easiest ones to work with, right? Helping them understand how your technology can solve their problem, that's the key piece, right? And that's where you spend most of your time. At the same time, helping an AI model vendor partner understand how our platform can help their technology. That's another one where, again, you see the light go in their eye and they go, I get it now, right? I mentioned, I think earlier today, we were speaking about one of the partners we work with in Germany, and their focus is very niche, right? They only work in one area. And I said, I can take what you guys do and open it up to a dozen different markets, right? Because that's not where their head is at, but that's where their solution could be used.
Yeah.
And so quite often it's this thing, helping them understand, I get it, your focus is here, we get that, but let's just see if we can scale it out for you, because it opens up a whole range of possibilities for them.
That makes sense. And maybe so we can understand better what you do. Can you tell us a bit more about TRU Recognition and what you do there?
Yeah, so TRU Recognition is a vision AI platform, and I guess the easiest way of thinking of it is we link a customer's infrastructure, whether that's CCTV or sensors or drones or whatever it is, to AI model partners. We don't build any AI models ourselves, and so the platform is designed very much to be a conduit between AI model vendors and their solutions and customer CCTV. And so that's the easiest way to define it. Quite often I have to go into quite a lot of depth with the AI model vendors to explain we're not a competitor to you guys. We're not going to reverse engineer your models and try and build something. That's not what we do. What I'm trying to do is get the best solutions I can to the customer. And so that's quite often a combination of models. It's very rarely a single model. And so it's all about, again, that time to value for the customer, because they don't want to go out and test 9 different solutions either, right? And so if I can get them that solution as quickly as possible, that helps them, right? And on 2 folds, right? The first is solve the problem they're dealing with today, but also make sure that they're able to look at problems tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so, how do I give them an investment that they're future-proofing? And that's where most COOs and CFOs, they're really interested in. It's like, okay, if I'm going to invest in something, I need to know that it can solve the problem today. I'm getting immediate value, but also I'm future-proofing myself, right? And the last thing that you want to say to a customer is, yep, that's great, but we just need you to reinvest. Like they go, what do you mean? Well, these cameras are no good. Why? Right? And so, the number of times we've walked into retailers and they've got like 50 cameras on the ceiling. And you go, why? And they've gone, well, this camera does this and this camera does this. And it's like, oh my God, that's the wrong approach, right? And so it's a different mindset. But it seems to be resonating. We've had some really good successes. We're working with some really large organizations. We'll publish them soon, as soon as that's the other problem is, of course, most customers, when they solve for something, they don't want anybody else to know.
No, for sure. That's a dirty little secret.
And it's not even government. If it was government, I'd understand it. But yeah, it's very much keeping the privacy to themselves. So.
Yeah, that's the same for us. But talking about your customers, maybe you cannot name them, but can you tell us a bit more like where are you operating? Like what are the typical fields or area? Like you mentioned retail, for example, but
yeah, I mean,
so we can figure out the use cases.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, retail is an interesting one. We've worked with probably a dozen different retail organizations. The big focus for them is loss, right? It's loss prevention.
Okay.
And so, unfortunately, that's where they completely focus.
So can you just explain what loss prevention is so we can better understand?
Sure. So the easy way to describe it is when stock disappears and it isn't paid for.
Okay. So that's easy to understand.
Right, yeah. So the interesting thing is that, when you start to run through, everyone assumes that things are stolen from a store, right? Yeah. The fact is we spoke to a customer in New Zealand who said 80% of their loss happens before it even gets to the store.
Okay, so loss is not the same as theft.
No. Right. And that's why it's sort of loss prevention.
Okay,
it's not just about theft. The focus is definitely on theft. Right. And the problem is that if you approach a customer and say we can solve that part of the problem, when they look at it at the end of the month, they go, okay, we just solved 10% of our problem. That doesn't help. Right. And so sometimes it's about looking at it holistically and stepping back and saying, okay, what are the other areas we need to focus on to help you solve that problem? The other thing is that once a retailer starts to look at what they can actually do with the CCTV they have, they start to get really excited, right? We sat down with one customer, and again, it started with loss prevention, and by the time we finished a workshop with them, we had like 50 different use cases that they could look
so
at.
you work with them to help them understand where they can actually put like the intelligence in.
Correct. Yeah. That's the focus.
And
again,
are they able to figure it out themselves? Like, for example, you say, okay, like here are some use cases you didn't think about. Try to find more of them, or you have to work with it work on it with them. Sorry, so they are really able to figure that out.
Depends on the customer.
Yeah.
Look, some of them get it right away. Right. As soon as they sort of put two and two together and they start to realize, okay, I have this huge asset here in my CCTV infrastructure, and now I have a tool that lets me choose the different components of that. They get it really quickly, right? The problem is sometimes that you need to pull them back a bit. Say, okay, I get it. I understand you're really excited. Let's just pick one or two that we can get value out straight away, right? Because again, you need to prove the value of what you're putting in. We have this common, back and forth where it's a proof of concept. It's like, no, I'm not trying to prove the concept that visual AI works. Visual AI works. You can go anywhere and you can see it used anywhere. It's all about how do I generate value for you as a customer using this technology.
Which is really different because like you have the model prediction, as you mentioned, like there is rarely only one single model, you have several of them. And then on top of this, you will have like the insight that the customer is looking for, which is not like the model prediction. You don't care if the box is there. You care how many of them you have or anything like this.
Yeah, or if it moves or if it's been left alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, And so the interesting one is airports. Airports are the ones where you don't really think about it, but they're small cities, right? And so they have retail, they have security, they have, there's all sorts of different, they have parking, they have traffic flow, they've got,
cleaning, everything.
It's just stunning. And so if you sit down with an airport, my God, the number of use cases that they have is just crazy. And also the number of cameras at an airport is also quite stunning. And
that must be the biggest number of cameras, except for like government.
Location. I'd say in a single location, probably, we're excluding government because, that just throws the numbers
of course
out the window. But in a single location, airports are probably some of the biggest. And again, the variance of use cases they look for from, unattended bags to foreign objects on debris to, barrier entry. And it's just crazy the number of use cases that they have. And so, that's where, our platform becomes really, really powerful for them because they can focus on one thing today and then they can pivot, right?
Yeah.
Another really big one that we're talking to at very early stages of conversation is cruise liners, right?
Okay.
Because again, it's just a floating city, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But if you think about it, you've got this enclosed CCTV infrastructure on a city that's floating around, and your ability to sort of pinpoint and find things. I don't know if you've ever been on one of those cruises, but there's 17 floors. You can get lost very easily. And so the idea of, how do we use that technology to help the staff, help the customers, that becomes really, really powerful.
Okay. And so I understand that your platform, so you're going to manage like all the different cameras. So you will connect to existing infrastructure, but to run the model, you are going to need like some compute infrastructure in the place or connect to API. But I imagine that it does not exist at the moment that you want to implement your solution. So are you responsible for this? You just make the recommendation to the clients?
We make a recommendation.
Okay.
So, and again, it's very much driven by the client. So if they use cloud infrastructure from Microsoft or they use cloud infrastructure from Google or Amazon, we don't care.
Yeah, but I imagine, for example, for the cruise, I imagine they do not use
hardware.
Cloud infrastructure.
100%. No, absolutely. You're right. And so for them, it's hardware. So again, our platform doesn't care. So whether it's in the cloud or if it's on premise.
For sure. But it could delay the deal because they have to invest in this. They have to do like the research. They have to implement it. They have to buy it maybe from some other suppliers. So
the biggest problem with hardware is scale, right? And so if you start with a specific hardware format, that's great. And then as soon as the customer says, we want to do these other 50 things, that doesn't scale. That's why cloud is super powerful because you can just say, hey, throw a lot more hardware at it. Having said that, some of the things that we saw today, there's a lot of improvements happening on the number of use cases you can run on hardware.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And so, and again, you'll see that exponential growth where you'll see a lot more being done with a lot less. And I don't mean Raspberry Pis, although, quite often you'll hear that thrown at people, but, the idea of, being able to put in a big piece of hardware and have that scale and then improve over time as opposed to getting worse over time.
Yeah, so that's going to help you, definitely.
Absolutely.
And so when you want to start trying a project or you want to prove the value to some customer, what are the KPI that you usually like set in place before starting? So what are they looking at and how do you actually prove that like it's working for them?
Yeah, I mean, so the first thing you really need to do is nail down what they're trying to solve, right?
Yeah.
And so you usually start with okay, what is the end piece here? What are we trying to achieve? And so once you've got that defined, then we go back and say, okay, how do we help them achieve that? Again, the really important thing is you always should be using, in our opinion, a customer's footage, right? There's absolutely no point proving to them that in a white lab with a white table, I can see a black box, right? Because that's not real world, and nobody does that. And the problem with that is that if you prove that works, then the minute that you put in their environment, everything's going to fail. And so a big part of what we do is, everything has to be in their environment. Now, that's the first piece. The second piece is that once we've solved that problem or whatever the solution is, right, what can we do next, right? Because nobody ever wants to invest in something that does one thing and that's it, and then close the door and walk away. They need to be able to show the value. And so, what we do, and I'm literally doing this next week with the customer, is once we've done that first use case or second use case and say, okay, this is now what's being done. It's like, okay, what else can we do for you, right, in your environment? And again, it isn't until I start thinking about, well, it'd be great if we could use our infrastructure to do this. This is another problem we hadn't thought of, right? So they need to get in that mindset of thinking about problem solving, right? And so that's the best place to start.
Sure. So you have to connect to existing systems like CCTVs, for example, for your software to work and see if you want to deliver the solution. Is there some need for like upgrading the existing system? Like, how does it like really work? Like, do you encounter some challenges when you come you might encounter some really old stuff that is actually in the building? Maybe there are like some different vendors. Maybe there are like, how do you address this?
So I guess the first criteria is digital, right? If it's an analog system, that's a problem.
Okay.
And so that's the first,
you can't do that.
Pretty much.
Like, out of curiosity, like if there is an analog system, like there is really nothing you can do?
If there is some way of getting digital out of it, sure. But if it's an analog feeds into an analog system, then no, there's not a lot we can do, right? Look, don't get me wrong. I know that if I got my engineering team, they'd say, yeah, of course we can do it. But again, it's all about time to value, right?
Yeah,
there's no point in coming up with something that's, we can do that in 6 months. It's like, dude, in 6 months, it's going to be a completely different game, right? And so that's the first criteria is digital. The second piece is, you're right, integrating with multiple different systems it takes time. And so, sometimes you'll start with the basics. It's like, well, can I get an RTSP feed out? That's a start, right? It's super basic. It's horrible, but it's a start. And so with that, we can then go on to how do I integrate with your CCTV, system? We've got a really great working relationship with OpenEye. They've got a cloud-based digital system, so their VMS is amazing. We've done a lot of work with some of the big guys, so with Milestone and Genetec and those guys as well. They've got a lot of APIs that you can use. And so again, the more mature that solution is, the easier it is to integrate. There are some older solutions that we've worked with that were extremely painful, and you spend a lot of time, right? And you don't get a lot of value out of it. And so it's about that time for value piece. And so the easier that they make it for us, the better it is for the customer. And so that's probably the first. But again, it's one of the first questions you ask is, what are you using today?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that as the time goes, it's going to be easier and easier because like the solutions, they are like more mature and they are more open and they are made to be like integrated with other systems like yours. So it will be simpler. Could you share with us, so we really picture like what you could earn from working with a solution like yours, like if you have like a success story, like something like a before and after, and with some numbers, maybe with the scale of the use case or the scale of the ROI maybe that the client can get at the end on one or multiple use cases.
So, I mean, I'll focus on one of the retailers. So we did a lot of work with retailers around loss prevention, right? And the focus on them was very much loss prevention. And so, when they looked at it from how much stock is walking out the door versus, how much we're losing. And so the first thing was to actually give them numbers, right? Because they didn't know what they didn't know. And so we know from an end of the year, this is what we have no idea where that's disappearing, right? And so the first focus was just giving them the initial data. That in itself was enough for them to say, okay, we can justify spending the money that we have because now we have actual data with regards to this. The second piece was, okay, now that we have this data, how do I start to curb some of the locations? And again, it's not about our solution solving the problem. This is where it becomes really interesting. It's about our solution providing the data so the customer can change the way they do things, which solve the problem. And so, one of the examples was, they had this issue where, you know, everyone was congregating around a specific area, and that area was where a lot of the problems were happening. I was like, well, why is everyone gathering there? And I said, what's the easiest place? And I said, well, your process would be tell people they can't be there, right? And so it's all about, you know, providing enough data for them to say, hey, now I need to change our work process. And that will improve our results. And again, the beauty of it is that, yes, we solve the problem for them. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, so now because of our platform, they have the data to be able to make those decisions, right?
So it's not even about like because so it's just giving them the observability so they know what's going on, but then you do not even have to be responsible of like alerting them, like giving them alerts because there are too many people credited.
Well, I mean, alerts is a great example, right? And so one of the classic is they start to get so many alerts that they go into freak out mode.
Yeah, it's like
right?
alert fatigue and
they say, yeah, we'll start to ignore them, right? And I said, but the reason you're getting the alerts is because you asked to see something, right? Now you're being told this is happening. Your process is to reduce the amount of alerts by changing your business process, right?
That would make sense.
Right. Well, it's like, okay, so we did some work with some of the big, I think they're called malls in America, you know, lots of retail stores in a single location.
And supermarkets.
And so, you know, for them, providing them an update or a notification that something occurred is completely useless if there isn't a human being there on the spot to solve it, right? And so it needs to be this conglomeration between getting the results and the notifications to the right person so they can act on it, right? Because then the whole point of my platform is to provide information that can be acted upon. There's absolutely no point sending somebody a report at the end of the month saying, hey, this happened 47 times. Well, guess what?
That's the first part. That's
right?
the observability you were talking about.
Right. And so it's like I need to take that piece and say, okay, when that occurs, who needs to know, right? I do a lot of work with security companies in Australia. And so one of the classics is, how do I enable the guards to be in the right place at the right time, right? And so it's all about providing that information to act upon, right? Security companies get really funny when they talk to AI vendors, right? Because they think, oh, you're out to remove our jobs. I said, even if a drone is doing a surveillance loop, that drone cannot stop somebody walking through a gate, right?
That's for sure.
And so all it can do is let your person know, hey, if you're patrolling a kilometer of fence line, again, I talk with big numbers because we're in Australia, right? Telling that guard where they need to be at the right time is key, right? And so how do I combine both the information that we're providing with the physical component, right, to get a result for the customer?
Okay, but where do you stop at TRU Recognition? Because like that would require, like, for example, you need some custom alerting, custom maybe applications, you need the notifications to be sent like somewhere. Like I think it must be different for every client because they want the alert to be like in their dashboard and not in that application. So where do you stop?
Yeah, so basically we'll stop by providing the information to their dashboarding system. All right.
Okay.
I don't want to give the customer another dashboard, another screen to look at, another solution.
Okay, but they must all have their like custom solution, like in-house or system. So how do you?
Yeah, the ones that we work with so far, they're really good at helping us with their APIs. So,
okay,
you know, we're working with a customer here in the US, and they've got some brilliant people who work on their APIs because most of them have their own custom software, which is great, right? It's fantastic. It's great. It's a solution for them. But then again, you know, if I tried to interface to their software, it would be a nightmare. Yeah. And so they've got some really good people. So what we try to do is work with as many of their systems as we can, right? Again, I don't want to be another data lake for a customer because they've already got their data lake, right? And so it's like, how can I provide the data to them? And so a lot of the work that our engineers do is how do I take the information that we've built and put it into something that a customer can then digest?
Okay, that makes sense. And so you talked about like the security use cases, and so I'm being curious, but have you ever declined a project because like it seemed abusive in some ways, like in the use of the AI or computer vision, or like otherwise what will make you refuse a project, maybe for like technical reason or because like the system is too old, like what could be the reasons?
Anything that impacts on the privacy of an end user or a customer, we tend to shy away from.
Okay.
It breaks all of our policies with regards to privacy. And so anything like that, we'll tend to shy away from. That's a big one. That's a big red flag for us.
That's
right?
a huge one, indeed.
So the other one is where, you know, you can see that the customer's focusing on the wrong thing. And so sometimes they don't like to hear that. And so quite often you'll have to say, you know what, we get it, we understand, we can't help you here. Only because it will take someone, the amount of work it would take to help a customer move along that We're just not big enough to worry about that right now. So, if they're open to looking at different things, we absolutely will work with everyone. But sometimes that will take time.
No, that makes sense. Often we see if you take the vertical companies, like for example, we interviewed Vision, so they are doing theft detection in everywhere in the world, and one of the challenge that they will encounter is that obviously their model is going to work well in some places, and some other places they will deploy, but they had less training data, so their model will work a bit worse until they retrain the model, and then it's good in every location. So from what I understand, you have partners and customers all over the world. So the partners, they may have built their models for one specific application with the data they had at the moment. How do you often re-benchmark, or how do you ensure that the partner's model is going to stay relevant for a given customer and it will not decrease in performance? Or for example, you have a customer in America and you can give him a partner model and it will work, and then you have another customer in Finland and you want to forward him the same models from the same partners, and here it doesn't work. How would you manage this kind of situation?
So again, the beauty of the platform is we're not stuck with a single model, and so we can use multiple models. So if we had a solution that was working in the US and it wasn't working in Finland, then I'd probably look for someone who works in Finland. At the same time, we try to work with the model vendors to help them improve their solutions. So, I mean, the reason that we met with you guys is because a big part of what you do actually helps model vendors, right? And so, we're doing some amazing work with this little Australian company in Melbourne, and their detection models are off the charts. It's amazing. And then when we spoke to them about you guys, they were like, hey, you know what, that would help us a lot. And so quite often it's a little bit of helping both ways. And so if I can help a model vendor be better at the way they do, that helps us because it becomes a better solution for us. At the same time, we've got a lot of customers who have data scientists who are really scary. They're brilliant at what they do, but sometimes the depth of what they go to is just amazing. We were working with a mining group in Western Australia. They had a data scientist who could tell the purity of the ore by the bubbles coming out of the molten metal.
Yeah, which is insane.
It's crazy. And so, quite often it's being able to take that kind of genius and say, okay, how do we make that practical? How do we help you use that? And quite often those guys are really interested in getting their models out there. They want to be able to, I think the words that the data scientist uses is, I want my solution to be able to be used by every mining group in the world. Now, I'm pretty sure his boss doesn't want that, but the idea is that, how do we take that and make it maybe a viable
for other kind of
financial solution for them, right? And so they can outsource that. So it becomes really interesting when you can have these discussions. But again, that learning piece is huge. And again, some of the things that you guys provide, Pixelia provide, I think is key to a lot of these organizations being able to take advantage of these data sources they have.
Okay. And so, for example, do you sometimes make the bridge between the client's data, if they agree to, of course, and your model provider? So the client, they agree to give some data, so their model will become better. And your partner, he obviously will want this data because his model will be better. So he has nothing to lose here, but the client might have something to lose, or maybe there is a price to it. So do you do it sometimes?
It's a negotiation, right? And so it's one of those things where you have to explain the advantage to the customer, but at the same time, and this is where it becomes a problem, is where the customer goes, absolutely, you can use my data, but then any changes to that model are mine. So it's this back and forth. And look, it's always going to be a negotiation because that's just how it works. But again, for us, it's about how do we make it better for the customer and how do we make it better for the model provider. I think one of the examples we said, it has to be a win-win-win. The customer has to win, the partner has to win, and TRU have to win, right? And so if we can do that, right, and I don't really see any reason that you wouldn't be able to do that, then it's perfect. Because the other thing that wins is Vision AI wins, right? Because again, a customer who said, I've had a great experience with Vision AI, regardless of whether it's TRU or Pixelia or whatever.
Everyone wins.
That wins for the industry, right? Because again, a lot of the conversations we'll have, and I'm sure that most AI vendors have had it, where you walk in and they assume that you're Skynet and Terminator and you're there to replace everybody with robots, right? And so, anything that can help the industry is a win for us. And so if I see a competitor have a win, that's a good thing, right? Because right now, this is very early stages of this industry.
Yeah, which is crazy because the technologies we work with, they are not LLMs most of the time. They are deep learning computer vision. So the technologies date from 10, 20 years ago, they become like practical, like really 5 years ago, which is like pretty recent. But still, like everyone is focusing on LLMs now and saying that like this kind of tasks are really solved, and most of the people, they know about AI, but like they truly don't know about AI. And most people will talk to will think that we are Skynet and you try to replace everyone's work and like AI will take over the world, which is like definitely not going to happen, and it's definitely still early. But I think people tend to like misunderstand this kind of thing.
Look, and this has happened multiple times throughout our history, right? So, when we had the technology revolution and the industrial revolution, it was always a fear of replacement, right? In general, human beings don't like change, right? And so helping them understand that this isn't a threat, right? That's the biggest problem, right? This is not a threat. This is not a threat to your livelihood. This is not a threat to the way you do things, right? This is a threat to the way that business process happens, all right? But it's an improvement, right? And so if you can make it win-win, and this is, it's one of the mantras that I run is that whatever I do, everyone has to win, right? Because the only thing that should lose is time. Time is the thing that we should be better at. And so if I can help a customer be better with their time, if I can help a partner be better with their time, right? Everybody win. And so that's the focus, right? The only thing that we cannot change is time. Right? Time is the thing that ticks for everybody, right? I remember one of my early mentors said that the beggar and the millionaire have the same 24 hours in a day, right? Yep. And so how do we make best use of that time?
That's a nice quote. Maybe if we take a few seconds to look at like the future of our field, and that would be like the end of the discussion, but we see more and more multimodal, like especially like in CVPR. So this is a computer vision conference, but a lot of people are now focusing in their research, but also in the vendors, on multimodal use cases that emerge these days. Where do you see the next breakthrough will happen in your field, and how, like with the fusion of the modalities, like how it will impact what you do at TRU?
Yeah, I mean, look, the one constant in our industry right now is change, right? And so any organization that thinks that whatever they're doing today is what they're going to be doing in 12 months is kidding themselves. I think the one focus would be is that you need to be able to continue to evolve and change. The technology is evolving, I would say daily, right? I wouldn't even say monthly or weekly. It's literally daily. And so your ability to continue to evolve and take advantage of these things, I think that's the one thing that you'll have to focus on. And at TRU, we do the same thing, right? Every day we look for new things. And so if I don't have a platform that continue to evolve and take advantage of all these technologies, then I'm going to be part of the dust of the history, right? Yeah. And so I think, making a prediction with regards to where it's going to go I have no idea. I really don't. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. But I try to be the guy who reads the most because, it's from hearing and learning. That's where you start to get, this is an idea of what we could do, where we could go.
Yeah, and I don't think this is like really, as you mentioned, you will learn way more things if you read or if you listen to people than if you just try to be the smartest in the room. And maybe from what you experience with your own customers or your own partners, are you seeing that people are trying, like, because you mentioned your customers, they get really excited when they get to learn about all the potential use cases they have with all the data they have, and you solved some of their use cases with computer vision, but they might say, okay, but we do record some of the stuff, or we do have like some, I don't know, like vibration data coming from somewhere, we have some text data, and we would want you to make sense of all of it too. So did you see some of those signals from the industry coming in that would make you would say, okay, maybe that the use case we're seeing now, we're going like this and there, and it's not computer vision only, but it's like computer vision and something else?
Yeah, definitely. So definitely, right now our focus is on computer vision, but at the end of the day, sensors, infrared, like all of these different types of data sources will contribute. I can definitely see that happening, where it's all going to be coming to a point where the medium is going to be ubiquitous. Right, and whether it's vision, whether it's sensors data, whether it's all going to be just another data source, right? And so our ability to match between the different data sources and the different models, right? That's going to be key. And you're right, it's going to be a much more powerful solution when you start to be able to integrate that. We're already talking with a lot of agriculture groups who they don't have a lot of vision, right? In Australia, some of the agriculture guys, like their fields are like 20 kilometers this way and 20 kilometers that way, and so the sheer number of cameras you'd need to have to cover that, right? But they've got sensors in the soil, and so they know what the moisture content is. It's like, okay, how can I combine the weather report with the sensors in the soil, with the vision that we have to help them get a better solution, right? And so I can see all of this coming to a point where we're getting more and more data. I don't think that it's going to be separate industries. I really don't. And so I can see it all coming to a head. But of course, right now, just for today, we're focusing on computer vision.
So cool. Nick, thank you so much for coming here on the podcast, and wish you all the best for TRU Recognition in the future. And
Thank you for the invite. It was awesome. It was great to meet you guys.
So cool. See you.
Bye.
Merci d'avoir écouté jusqu'au bout. Si vous avez aimé cet épisode, aidez-nous en mettant 5 étoiles sur Spotify et Apple Podcast ou en mettant un petit commentaire. Et pour YouTube, n'hésitez pas à vous abonner et à liker la vidéo. Je vous dis à la prochaine dans Pixel Perfect.